This is Book 12 of John Dryden's translation of the Aeneid. There are two video versions of Book 12, one with explanatory notes and one with only the audiobook. The primary purpose of this series is to help the reader to understand the original language of John Dryden's 1697 translation. This opportunity is therefore afforded to discover how much you can understand unassisted. Please check to ensure you have selected your desired version. Book 12 will start with Turnus deciding to face Aeneas in single combat. Next, Juno will encourage Turnus' sister Juturna, a nymph of fountains, to protect Turnus. Aeneas and Latinus will perform sacrifices, and Aeneas and Turnus will prepare for single combat. With Juturna's encouragement, the Latins will break the truce. Turnus will wreak havoc on the Trojans. Aeneas will be healed after being wounded and will return to battle, and Juturna will aid Turnus. Aeneas and Turnus will both wreak havoc on their enemies. Aeneas will invade Laurentum, and Turnus will stop this destruction by again calling for single combat. Aeneas and Turnus will fight in single combat. Jupiter and Juno will discuss Aeneas' fate, and the battle will finally end. Book 12 of the Aeneid by Virgil, translated by John Dryden. When Turnus saw the Latins leave the field, their armies broken and their courage quelled, himself become the mark of public spite, his honor questioned for the promised fight, the more he was with vulgar hate oppressed, the more his fury boiled within his breast. He roused his vigor for the last debate, and raised his haughty soul to meet his fate. As, when the swains the Libyan lion chase, he makes a sour retreat, nor mends his pace. But, if the pointed javelin pierce his side, the lordly beast returns with double pride. He wrenches out the steel, he roars with pain, his sides he lashes, and erects his mane. So Turnus fares. His eyeballs flash with fire, through his wide nostrils clouds of smoke expire. Trembling with rage, around the court he ran, at length approached the king, and thus began. No more excuses or delays. I stand in arms prepared to combat hand to hand this base deserter of his native land. The Trojan by his word is bound to take the same conditions which himself did make. Renew the truce, the solemn rites prepare, and to my single virtue trust the war. The Latians unconcerned shall see the fight. This arm unaided shall assert your right. Then, if my prostrate body press the plain, to him the crown and beauteous bride remain. To whom the king sedately thus replied, Brave youth, the more your valor has been tried, the more becomes it us, with due respect, to weigh the chance of war, which you neglect. You want not wealth or a successive throne, or cities which your arms have made your own. My towns and treasures are at your command, and stored with blooming beauties is my land. Laurentum more than one Lavinia sees, unmarried, fair, of noble families. Now let me speak, and you with patience hear, things which perhaps may grate a lover's ear, but sound advice, proceeding from a heart sincerely yours and free from fraudful art. The gods by signs have manifestly shown no prince Italian born should heir my throne. Oft have our augurs in predictions skilled, and oft our priests foreign son revealed. Yet one by worth that cannot be withstood, bribed by my kindness to my kindred blood, urged by my wife who would not be denied, I promised my Lavinia for your bride. Her from her plighted lord by force I took, all ties of treaties and of honor broke. On your account I waged an impious war, with what success it is needless to declare. I and my subjects feel, and you have had your share. Twice vanquished while in bloody fields we strive, scarce in our walls we keep our hopes alive. The rolling flood runs warm with human gore, the bones of Latians blanch the neighboring shore. Why put I not an end to this debate, still unresolved, and still a slave to fate? If Turnus' death a lasting peace can give, why should I not procure it whilst you live? Should I to doubtful arms your youth betray? What would my kinsman the Rutulian say? And should you fall in fight, which heaven defend, how curse the cause which hastened to his end the daughter's lover and the father's friend? Weigh in your mind the various chance of war, pity your parent's age, and ease his care. Such balmy words he poured, but all in vain. The proffered medicine but provoked the pain. The wrathful youth, disdaining the relief, with intermitting sobs thus vents his grief. The care, O best of fathers, which you take for my concerns, at my desire forsake. Permit me not to languish out my days, but make the best exchange of life for praise. This arm, this lance, can well dispute the prize, and the blood follows where the weapon flies. His goddess mother is not near to shroud the flying coward with an empty cloud. But now the queen, who feared for Turnus' life, and loathed the hard conditions of the strife, held him by force, and dying in his breath, in these sad accents gave her sorrow breath. O Turnus, I adjure thee by these tears, and whate'er price a maiden's honour bears within thy breast, since thou art all my hope, my sickly mind's repose, my sinking age's prop, since on the safety of thy life alone depends Latinus and the Latian throne, refuse me not this one, this only prayer, to waive the combat and pursue the war. Whatever chance attends this fatal strife, think it includes in thine a maiden's life. I cannot live a slave, or see my throne usurped by strangers or a Trojan son. At this a flood of tears Lavinia shed, a crimson blush her beauteous face o'erspread, varying her cheeks by turns with white and red. The driving colours, never at a stay, run here and there and flush and fade away. Delightful change! Thus Indian ivory shows, which with the bordering paint of purple glows, or lilies damasked by the neighbouring rose. The lover gazed, and burning with desire, the more he looked, the more he fed the fire. Revenge and jealous rage and secret spite roll in his breast, and rouse him to the fight. Then fixing on the queen his ardent eyes, firm to his first intent, he thus replies: O mother, do not by your tears prepare such boding omens, and prejudge the war. Resolved on fight, I am no longer free to shun my death, if heaven my death decree. Then turning to the herald, thus pursues: Go, greet the Trojan with ungrateful news. Denounce from me that when tomorrow's light shall gild the heavens, he need not urge the fight. The Trojan and Rutulian troops no more shall die with mutual blood the Latian shore. Our single swords the quarrel shall decide, and to the victor be the beauteous bride. So Turnus has made his way back into the town, and he sees that this last retreat has really called Turnus's character into question. And this is like a lion who chases after the country boys and is pierced in the side, but it only redoubles his pride and his fury. And this is like Turnus. He has been beaten, but he is no less willing to fight. In fact, his eyeballs are flashing with fire, and we're told that smoke is pouring from his nostrils. So that's how furious he still is. He says, there's no more excuse. I will fight Aeneas one-on-one, man-to-man. No more of this war. This is how we will decide who gets Lavinia and who gets the crown. And so to this, Latinus the king says, Oh, you are so brave, Turnus. We are proud to have you on our side. The truth is, though, there is so much that you could have, even if you didn't fight. If you gave up Lavinia, there are other unmarried, beautiful women that you could marry. There are other riches that you could have besides a king's riches. It was wrong of me to refuse Lavinia to Aeneas. I listened to you, I listened to my wife, when our priests and our augurs told me it would be a foreign son that had her hand. I should have given her to Aeneas. And now you want to fight. But What would people think of me, and if I allowed you to fight for something that would probably kill you when you could just leave things be and have peace without being killed? This is a dangerous war. Think of your father. Don't be foolish. Don't fight Aeneas. Let him have Lavinia and the crown, and you live out the rest of your days with the many blessings that will surely come. So he's pouring out these balmy words, line 72, but instead of being medicine, it provokes pain. Turnus responds, "Don't permit me to languish out my days without my prize. Don't be so certain of how this battle will turn out. Venus is not here to protect Aeneas, to take him away in a cloud." And so he says pretty much, "I will fight him regardless." So the queen, Aeneid, is worried about Turnus fighting Aeneas in a one-on-one battle. And so she says, "You are the one defender of the king Latinus and the Latian throne, of all of our safety. I beg you, don't fight him one-on-one. Just renew the war. Keep fighting." So Lavinia, at this, starts crying, and she's blushing so that her cheeks are turning from red to white to red. And it's really beautiful, like Indian ivory bordered by purple, or a piece of fabric with lilies and roses on it. Beautiful. And so Turnus the lover gazes and burns with desire, which feeds the fire of revenge, rage, and spite, and he will fight Aeneas for Lavinia and no other. So Turnus says to Aeneid, "Do not judge me defeated by Aeneas so quickly. I will fight, and if heaven says I need die, then I shall die." And he turns to a herald and says, "Go and tell the Trojan I will fight him man to man, and we will not stain the Latian shore with blood any more. The winner will get Lavinia." Line 126. He said, and striding on with speedy pace, he sought his coursers of the Thracian race. At his approach they tossed their heads on high, and proudly neighing promised victory. The sires of these Orithyia sent from far to grace Pulumnus when he went to war. The drifts of Thracian snows were scarce so white, nor northern winds in fleetness matched their flight. Officious grooms stand ready by his side, and some with combs their flowing manes divide, and others stroke their chests and gently soothe their pride. He sheathed his limbs in arms, a tempered mass of golden metal those and mountain brass. Then to his head his glittering helm he tied, and girt his faithful falchion to his side. In his Aeneid forge the god of fire that falchion labored for the hero sire. Immortal keenness on the blade bestowed, and plunged it hissing in the Stygian flood. Propped on a pillar, which the ceiling bore, was placed the lance Auruncan Actor wore, which with such force he brandished in his hand, the tough ash trembled like an osier wand. Then cried, "O ponderous spoil of Actor slain, and never yet by Turnus tossed in vain, fail not this day thy wonted force, but go, sent by this hand, to pierce the Trojan foe. Give me to tear his corslet from his breast, and from that eunuch head to rend the crest, dragged in the dust his frizzled hair to soil, hot from the vexing iron, and smeared with fragrant oil." Thus while he raves, from his wide nostrils flies a fiery steam, and sparkles from his eyes. So fares the bull in his loved female sight. Proudly he bellows and preludes the fight. He tries his goring horns against a tree, and meditates his absent enemy. He pushes at the winds, he digs the strand with his black hoofs, and spurns the yellow sand. Nor less the Trojan in his Lemnian arms to future fight his manly courage warms. He whets his fury, and with joy prepares to terminate at once the lingering wars. To cheer his chiefs and tender son, relates what heaven had promised, and expounds the fates. Then to the Latian king he sends to cease the rage of arms and ratify the peace. The morn ensuing from the mountain's height had scarcely spread the skies with rosy light. The ethereal coursers bounding from the sea from out their flaming nostrils breathed the day. When now the Trojan and Rutulian guard in friendly labor joined, the list prepared. Beneath the walls they measure out the space, then sacred altars rear on sods of grass, where, with religious their common gods they place. In purest white the priests their heads attire, and living waters bear, and holy fire, and o'er their linen hoods and shaded hair long twisted wreaths of sacred vervain wear. In order, issuing from the town, appears the Latin legion, armed with pointed spears. And from the fields, advancing on a line, the Trojan and the Tuscan forces join. Their various arms afford a pleasing sight. A peaceful train they seem, in peace prepared for fight. Betwixt their ranks the proud commanders ride, glittering with gold, and vests in purple dyed. Here Mnestheus, author of the Memmian line, and there Messapus, born of seed divine. The sign is given, and round the listed space each man in order fills his proper place. Reclining on their ample shields they stand, and fix their pointed lances in the sand. Now, studious of the sight, a numerous throng of either sex, promiscuous, old and young, swarm the town. By those who rest behind, the gates and walls and houses' tops are lined. All right, so Turnus with his lightning fast, snowy white Thracian horses gets ready for battle. Some are combing the horses' manes, others are gently stroking the horses' chests, and Turnus is preparing by putting on all of his armor and weapons. So he has his glittering helmet, his faithful falchion, his sword, that the god of fire, that would be Vulcan, made for the hero's sire, so Turnus' father. It was made and plunged into the river Styx. And Turnus, after he had killed Actor, took his lance, and it has never failed him. And so this day do not fail thy wonted or customary force. Pierce my Trojan foe. Give it to me to tear his breastplate and helmet off of him, that I may drag him through the dust dead, that his hair would be filthy as a result. And again, steam comes from his nostrils. This is like a bull preparing to fight for a mate, and he gores a tree with his horns. He digs at the dirt and the sand to get ready for the fight. And so Aeneas, the Trojan, is whetting his fury, sharpening it, and he is ready to end this bloody, lingering war. And so he sends for the Latian king, for Latinus, to end this day in peace through this one-on-one combat. So the sun rises, and it is time for the fight. The Trojans and the Rutulians make this list, this area for the fight, and they erect altars, and the religious ceremonies take place. The priests are there in pure white. They have living water, so fresh water from the stream. They have holy fire. They're in linen hoods, and they are adorned with wreaths of vervain or verbena. So out from the town come the Latin legion, and it's a beautiful sight, all of this glinting metal in the sun, all of these great heroes, Mnestheus, Messapus, and the sign is given. Each man, Turnus and Aeneas, take their place with their shields, their lances, and now everybody's watching to see what's going to happen inside the walls. Either sex, promiscuous, that's disorderly, are trying to find a place. Men, women, young, old, are all wanting to see on top of the gates, the walls, the housetops, whatever, so that they can see who will win this fight. Line 204. Meantime, the Queen of Heaven beheld the sight with eyes unpleased from Mount Albano's height, since called Albano by succeeding fame, but then an empty hill without a name. She thence surveyed the field, the Trojan powers, the Latian squadrons, and Laurentine towers. Then thus the goddess of the skies bespoke with sighs and tears the goddess of the lake. King Turnus' sister, once a lovely maid, ere to the lust of lawless Jove betrayed, compressed by force, but by the grateful god, now made the naos of the neighboring flood. "O nymph, the pride of living lakes," said she, "O most renowned and most beloved by me, long hast thou known, nor need I to record the wanton sallies of my wandering lord. Of every Latian fair whom Jove misled to mount by stealth my violated bed, to thee alone I grudged not his embrace, but gave a part of heaven in an unenvied place. Now learn from me thy near approaching grief, nor think my wishes want to thy relief. While fortune favored, nor heaven's king denied to lend my succor to the Latian side, I saved thy brother, and the sinking state. But now he struggles with unequal fate, and goes with gods averse, or matched in might, to meet inevitable death in fight. Nor must I break the truce, nor can sustain the sight. Thou, if thou darst thy present aid supply, it well becomes a sister's care to try." At this, the lovely nymph, with grief oppressed, thrice tore her hair, and beat her comely breast. To whom Saturnia thus: "Thy tears are late. Haste, snatch him, if he can be snatched from fate. New tumults kindle, violate the truce. Who knows what changeful fortune may produce? It is not a crime to attempt what I decree, or if it were, discharge the crime on me," she said, and sailing on the winged wind, left the sad nymph suspended in her mind. And now pomp the peaceful kings appear. 4 steeds the chariot of Latinus bear. 12 golden beams around his temples play, to mark his lineage from the god of day. 2 snowy coursers Turnus' chariot yoke, and in his hand 2 massy spears he shook. Then issued from the camp, in arms divine, Aeneas, author of the Roman line, and by his side Ascanius took his place, the second hope of Rome's immortal race. Adorned in white, a reverend priest appears, and offerings to the flaming altars bears, a porket and a lamb that never suffered shears. Then to the rising sun he turns his eyes, and strews the beasts designed for sacrifice with salt and meal. With like officious care he marks their foreheads, and he clips their hair. Betwixt their horns the purple wine he sheds, with the same generous juice the flame he feeds. Aeneas then unsheathed his shining sword, and thus with pious prayers the gods adored. "All-seeing sun, and thou, Ausonian soil, for which I have sustained so long a toil, thou, king of heaven, and thou, the queen of air, propitious now, and reconciled by prayer. Thou, god of war, whose unresisted sway the labors and events of arms obey. Ye living fountains and ye running floods, all powers of ocean, all ethereal gods, hear and bear record. If I fall in field, or recreant in the fight to Turnus yield, my Trojans shall increase Evander's town. Ascanius shall renounce the Ausonian crown. All claims, all questions of debate shall cease, nor he nor they with force infringe the peace. But if my juster arms prevail in fight, as sure they shall, if I divine aright, my Trojans shall not o'er the Italians reign. Both equal, both unconquered shall remain. Joined in their laws, their lands, and their abodes, I ask but altars for my weary gods. The care of those religious rites be mine, the crown to King Latinus I resign. His be the sovereign sway, nor will I share his power in peace, or his command in war. For me, my friends another town shall frame, and bless the rising towers with fair Lavinia's name." Thus he. Then with erected eyes and hands the Latian king before his altar stands. "By the same heaven," said he, "and earth and main, and all the powers that all the three contain, by hell below, and by that upper God whose thunder signs the peace, who seals it with his nod, so let Latona's double offspring hear, and double-fronted Janus, what I swear. I touch the sacred altars, touch the flames, and all those powers attest, and all their names. Whatever chance befall on either side, no term of time this union shall divide. No force, no fortune shall my vows unbind, or shake the steadfast tenor of my mind. Not though the circling sea should break their bound, or flow the shores, or sap the solid ground. not though the lamps of heavens their spheres forsake, hurled down and hissing in the nether lake. Even as this royal scepter, for he bore a scepter in his hand, shall never more shoot out in branches, or renew the birth. An orphan now, cut from the mother earth by the keen axe, dishonored of its hair, and cased in brass for Latian kings to bear. When thus in public view the peace was tied with solemn vows, and sworn on either side, all dues performed which holy rites require, the victim beasts are slain before the fire, the trembling entrails from their bodies torn, and to the fattened flames in chargers borne. Okay, so Juno beholds the sight from Mount Albano, which was a nameless hill at that time. She looks and is not pleased with what she sees. She speaks to Juturnia, the goddess of the lake, Turnus' sister. She was a lovely maid once, but Jove had her, and now she is a Aeneid. And Juno tells her, of all of the females that Jove has cheated on me with, you were the one that I liked the most. You were the one I didn't mind. I want to relieve you from the grief that's coming your way. I was helping Turnus as much as possible before Jove, Jupiter, said I couldn't. And now your brother is struggling with fate, and the gods are against him. He is overmatched against Aeneas. His death is inevitable, unless you do something about it, and it would well become you to try as his sister. Well, Juturnia is overcome with grief by this, and she beats her breast. And Saturnia, that's Juno, says, no, it's too late to cry. Hurry up and do something about him. Snatch him from his fate. Violate the truce. It's not a crime to do so, and if it is, let the blame fall on me. So she says this, and she sails away on the wind, and here comes the kings Latinus and Aeneas there. And as the offerings are made by the priests, wine's poured on the heads between the horns, Aeneas unsheathes his sword and swears by several of the gods, by the king of heaven, that would be Jupiter, the queen of air, Juno, the god of war, Mars, ye living fountains and running floods, to the gods of the streams and rivers, the powerful oceans, the ethereal gods of the air and the heavens, hear and bear witness. If I die in this fight, or yield to Turnus, meaning I forfeit, then my Trojans will go to Vanderstown. Ascanius will not be king of the Ausonians, and everything will be peace. However, if I win, my Trojans shall not rule over the entirety of Italy. The Trojans and the Italians will remain separate, and all I ask is that my gods, the Penates from Troy, will have their own altars again. I will take care of those religious rites, and King Latinus can still be king. And we will make our own town, which will be Lavinium, named after Lavinia. Latinus responds in kind, by the same heaven and earth and the ocean, the main, and all the powers of the three contain, by hell below, by the upper god, and so much the same. And he says, by all these gods' names, whatever happen, I will not be the one to break the peace. And he finally says, even as this royal scepter which he holds in his hands will never grow into a tree again, since it's been cut off from Mother Earth by a keen axe, never will I break this peace. So they have both sworn to peace, and so they sacrifice these animals, and the entrails are taken out and borne on chargers or platters to the flames. Line 322. Already the Rutulians deem their man o'ermatched in arms before the fight began. First rising fears are whispered through the crowd, then, gathering sound, they murmur more aloud. Now, side to side, they measure with their eyes the champion's bulk, their sinews, and their size. The nearer they approach, the more is known the apparent disadvantage of their own. Turnus himself appears in public sight, conscious of fate, desponding of the fight. Slowly he moves, and at his altar stands with eyes dejected and with trembling hands. And while he mutters undistinguished prayers, a livid deadness in his cheeks appears. With anxious pleasure, when Juturna viewed the increasing fright of the mad multitude, when their short sighs and thickening sobs she heard, and found their ready minds for change prepared, dissembling her immortal form, she took Camertus' mien, his habit, and his look. A chief of ancient blood, in arms well known was his great sire, and he his greater son. His shape assumed, amid the ranks she ran, and humoring their first motions, thus began. For shame, Rutulians! Can you bear the sight of one exposed for all in single fight? Can we, before the face of heaven, confess our courage colder, or our numbers less? View all the Trojan host, the Arcadian band, and Tuscan army. Count 'em as they stand. Undaunted to the battle if we go, scarce every second man will share a foe. Turnus, it is true, in this unequal strife shall lose with honor his devoted life, or change it rather for immortal fame, succeeding to the gods from whence he came. But you, a servile and inglorious band, for foreign lords shall sow your native land, those fruitful fields your fighting fathers gained, which have so long their lazy sons sustained. With words like these, she carried her design. A rising murmur runs along the line. Then even the city troops and Latians, tired with tedious war, seem with new souls inspired. Their champion's fate with pity they lament, and of the league so lately sworn, repent. Nor fails the goddess to foment the rage with lying wonders and a false presage, but adds a sign, which, present to their eyes, inspires new courage and a glad surprise. For sudden in the fiery tracks above appears in pomp the imperial bird of Jove. A plump of fowl he spies that swim the lakes, and o'er their heads his sounding pinion shakes. Then stooping on the fairest of the train, in his strong talons trusts the silver swan. The Italians wonder at the unusual sight, but while he lags and labors in his flight, behold, the dastard fowl return anew, and with united force the foe pursue. Clamorous around the royal hawk they fly, and thickening in a cloud, o'ershake the sky. They cuff, they scratch, they cross his airy course, nor can the encumbered bird sustain their force. But vexed, not vanquished, drops the ponderous prey, and lightened of his burden, wings his way. The Ausonian bands with shouts salute the sight, eager of action, and demand the fight. Then King Tolumnius, versed in augurs' arts, cries out, and thus his boasted skill imparts. At length it is granted what I long desired. This is what my frequent vows required. Ye gods, I take your omen, and obey. Advance, my friends, and charge. I lead the way. These are the foreign foes whose impious band, like that rapacious bird, infest our land. But soon, like him, they shall be forced to see by strength united, and forego the prey. Your timely succor to your country bring. Haste to the rescue, and redeem your king, he said, and pressing onward through the crew, poised in his lifted arm, his lance he threw. Okay, so the Rutulians are looking at Turnus and at Aeneas again, and Turnus and at Aeneas again, and they're figuring Turnus is probably going to lose, and Turnus even knows it himself, is how he looks. They're whispering about this at first, and then murmur a little louder, and this is when Juturna decides to disguise herself as a man named Camertus. He's a chief of ancient blood, so well respected. His father was great, and he is greater, and she disguises herself as him and starts to incite the Italians to break the truce. For shame, Rutulians! Can you bear to see Turnus fight when you know he's going to lose? Look at the armies here. Are we really that much less skilled or less in number? Look at them. If we fought them head on in battle, There would be one of them for every two of us. Turnus, it's true, will either die or become a god for his lineage. However, we will have to serve these people, these foreigners. With words like these, she is able to incite the Latians to pity of Turnus and rage. The Italians look up and they see a strange sight. An eagle swoops down and grabs a silver swan. And as the eagle's taking the swan away, these other swan that were with this swan come and attack the eagle. And they're attacking so much that the eagle has to drop its prey and flies away. Well, they look at this, and King Tolumnius, who is skilled at reading these kinds of signs, because this is a sign from the gods, says, "Ah, this is what we wanted. Advance and charge, my friends." The eagle is like the Trojans, swooping down and attacking us, but soon, like the prey fought off the predator, we will fight off this impious band. And having said this, he presses through the crowd and throws his lance. Picking up line 404. The winged weapon, whistling in the wind, came driving on, nor missed the mark designed. At once the cornel rattled in the skies, at once tumultuous shouts and clamors rise. 9 brothers in a goodly band there stood, born of Arcadian mixed with Tuscan blood, Gylippus' sons. The fatal javelin flew, aimed at the midmost of the friendly crew. A passage through the jointed arms is found, just where the belt was to the body bound, and struck the gentle youth extended on the ground. Then, fired with pious rage, the generous train run madly forward to revenge the slain, and some with eager haste their javelins throw, and some with sword in hand assault the foe. The wished insult the Latin troops embrace, and meet their ardor in the middle space. The Trojans, Tuscans, and Arcadian line with equal courage obviate their design. Peace leaves the violated fields, and hate both armies urges to their mutual fate. With impious haste their altars are o'erturned, the sacrifice half broiled and half unburned. Thick storms of steel from either army fly, and clouds of clashing darts obscure the sky. Brands from the fire are missive weapons made, with chargers, bowls, and all the priestly trade. Latinus, frighted, hastens from the fray, and bears his unregarded gods away. These on their horses vault, those yoke the car, the rest with swords on high run headlong to the war. Messapus, eager to confound the peace, spurred his hot courser through the fighting priests, at King Aulestes, by his purple known, a Tuscan prince, and by his regal crown, and with a shock encountering bore him down. Backward he fell, and as his fate designed, the ruins of an altar were behind. There, pitching on his shoulders and his head amid the scattering fires, he lay supinely spread. The beamy spear, descending from above, his cuirass pierced, and through his body drove. Then, with a scornful smile, the victor cries, "The gods have found a fitter sacrifice." Greedy of spoils, the Italians strip the dead of his rich armor, and uncrown his head. Priest Coroneus armed his better hand from his own altar with a blazing brand, and as Ebusus with a thundering pace advanced to battle, dashed it on his face. His bristly beard shines out with sudden fires, the crackling crop a noisome scent expires. Following the blow, he seized his curling crown with his left hand, his other cast him down. The prostrate body with his knees he pressed, and plunged his holy poniard in his breast. While Podalirius with his sword pursued the shepherd Alcis through the flying crowd, swiftly he turns, and aims a deadly blow full on the front of his unwary foe. The broad axe enters with a crashing sound, and cleaves the chin with one continued wound. Warm blood and mingled brains besmear his arms around, and iron sleep his stupid eyes oppressed, and sealed their heavy lids in endless rest. But good Aeneas rushed amid the bands, bare was his head and naked were his hands, in sign of truce. Then thus he cries aloud, "What sudden rage, what new desire of blood inflames your altered minds? O Trojans, cease from impious arms, nor violate the peace. By human sanctions and by laws divine, the terms are all agreed, the war is mine. Dismiss your fears and let the fight ensue. This hand alone shall right the gods and you. Our injured altars and this broken vow to this avenging sword the faithless Turnus owe. Thus while he spoke, unmindful of defense, a winged arrow struck the pious prince. But whether from some human hand it came, or hostile god, is left unknown by fame. No human hand or hostile god was found to boast the triumph of so base a wound. All right, so King Tolumnius throws his lance, and he hits and kills one of 9 brothers standing there, and it hits him near the belt, slaying him. And this prompts such an instant rage in the Trojans that there is no hesitation and the war erupts again. So some are ready for the war and they just start throwing their javelins. Others are grabbing their swords, and the Latin troops charge, and the Trojans and allies try to obviate their design or prevent what they're trying to make happen. So peace leaves the field and hate starts guiding both armies. They leave their sacrifices half broiled, half burned. They start using the firebrands as missiles and throwing the platters, the bowls, and all of these things that should be considered holy. Messapus quickly kills King Alcestis, who falls back and falls into an altar, an event that causes Messapus to say, "Ha, the gods have found a better sacrifice now." Very callous words. The Italians strip the dead of his rich armor. One of the priests, Corneas, grabs a brand from the fire and dashes it on the face of Ebusus. This lights his beard on fire. And then he grabs his holy poniard, that would be his dagger, and plunges it into Ebusus's breast. So battle is erupting. Line 467, there's warm blood, mingled brains, and all of this horrible, gory mess. And Aeneas is the only one who cries for peace. Why is this happening? Stop! Don't violate the peace, Trojans. There's human sanctions against it. There's divine laws against it. The peace has been agreed upon. The war is between me and Turnus alone. Stop fighting. And as he speaks, a winged arrow strikes him. Still unknown to this day, says Virgil, whether it was a god or a human, because nobody claimed the deed, but Aeneas has been hit. Moving on to line 487. When Turnus saw the Trojan quit the plain, his chiefs dismayed, his troops a fainting train, the unhoped event his heightened soul inspires. At once his arms and coursers he requires, then with a leap his lofty chariot gains, and with a ready hand assumes the reins. He drives impetuous, and where he goes he leaves behind a lane of slaughtered foes. These his lance reaches, over those he rolls his rapid car and crushes out their souls. In vain the vanquished fly, the victor sends the dead men's weapons at their living friends. Thus on the banks of Hebrus' freezing flood, the god of battles in his angry mood, clashing his sword against his brazen shield, let loose the reins and scours along the field. Before the wind his fiery coursers fly, groans the sad earth, resounds the rattling sky. Wrath, terror, treason, tumult, and despair, dire faces and deformed, surround the car, friends of the god and followers of the war. With fury not unlike, nor less disdain, exulting Turnus flies along the plain. His smoking horses at their utmost speed he lashes on, and urges o'er the dead. Their fetlocks run with blood, and when they bound, the gore and gathering dust are dashed around. Thomorus and Pholus, masters of the war, he killed at hand, but Sthenelus afar. From far the sons of Imbricus he slew, Glaucus and Laudes of the Lycian crew. both taught to fight on foot, in battle joined, or mount the courser that outstrips the wind. Meantime Eumedes, vaunting in the field, new fired the Trojans, and their foes repelled. This son of Dolon bore his grandsire's name, but emulated more his father's fame. His guileful father sent a nightly spy the Grecian camp in order to descry. Hard enterprise, and well he might require Achilles' car and horses for his hire. But, met upon the scouts, the Aetolian prince in death bestowed a juster recompense. Fierce Turnus viewed the Trojan from afar, and launched his javelin from his lofty car. Then, lightly leaping down, pursued the blow, and pressing with his foot his prostrate foe, wrenched from his feeble hold the shining sword, and plunged it in the bosom of its lord. Possess, said he, the fruit of all thy pains, and measure at thy length our Latian plains. Thus are my foes rewarded by my hand. Thus may they build their town, and thus enjoy the land. Then Dares, Butes, Sybaris he slew, whom o'er his neck his floundering courser threw. As when loud Boreas, with his blustering train, stoops from above, incumbent on the main. Where'er he flies, he drives the wrack before, and rolls the billows on the Aegean shore. So, where resistless Turnus takes his course, the scattered squadrons bend before his force. His crest of horse's hair is blown behind by adverse air, and rustles in the wind. This haughty Phegeus saw with high disdain, and as the chariot rolled along the plain, light from the ground he leapt, and seized the rein. Thus hung in air, he still retained his hold, the coursers frighted, and their course controlled. The lance of Turnus reached him as he hung, and pierced his plated arms, but passed along, and only raised the skin. He turned and held against his threatening foe his ample shield, then called for aid, but while he cried in vain, the chariot bore him backward on the plain. He lies reversed, the victor king descends, and strikes so justly where his helmet ends, he lops the head. The Latian fields are drunk with streams that issue from the bleeding trunk. While he triumphs and while the Trojans yield, the wounded prince is forced to leave the field. So Turnus sees Aeneas quit the plain, meaning he's retreating to get healed and helped, and he decides to go full force against the Trojans. He hops on his chariot and assumes the reins and drives impetuous, leaving a trail of bodies as he goes. He kills some with the lance, he runs others over with his chariot, and uses the weapons of those he kills against the other Trojans. And this is like Mars clashing with his sword and brazen shield, with fiery coursers flying, and all of these horrible things, wrath, treason, terror, and so on, surrounding this car. And this is how furious and godlike Turnus is at this moment. His horse's ankles run with blood, and they bound through gore and dust. He kills Thamyris, Pholus, Sthenelus, Imbricus, and so on. And then he meets Eumedes, a son of Dolon, who snuck out in the middle of the night and was met by Diomedes and Odysseus in the Iliad. He hits him and rips the sword out of his hands and stabs it into Eumedes. He kills several others, and he's compared to Boreas, the wind, when he makes the waves crash on the shore of the Aegean. So a man named Phegeus sees Turnus causing all this destruction and decides he's going to go and attack Turnus's chariot. And so he does. He's borne backward along the plain, and Turnus quickly tries to stab him and only gets his plated arm, and then pulls out his sword and cuts off his head so that the Latian fields are drunk with his blood. Again, very grisly descriptions in this. And now we have Aeneas being taken from the field. Line 567. Strong Menesthius and Achates often tried, and young Ascanius, weeping by his side, conduct him to his tent. Scarce can he rear his limbs from earth, supported on a spear. Resolved in mind, regardless of the smart, he tugs with both his hands and breaks the dart. The steel remains. No readier way he found to draw the weapon than to enlarge the wound. Eager of fight, impatient of delay, he begs, and his unwilling friends obey. Iapis was at hand to prove his art, whose blooming youth so fired Apollo's heart, that for his love he proffered to bestow his tuneful harp and his unerring bow. The pious youth, more studious how to save his aged sire, now sinking to the grave, preferred the power of plants and silent praise of healing arts before Phoebean bays. Propped on his lance the pensive hero stood, and heard and saw unmoved the mourning crowd. The famed physician tucks his robes around with ready hands and hastens to the wound. With gentle touches he performs his part, this way and that soliciting the dart, and exercises all his heavenly art. All softening simples known of sovereign use he presses out and pours their noble juice. These first infused to lenify the pain, he tugs with pincers, but he tugs in vain. Then to the patron of his art he prayed. The patron of his art refused his aid. Meantime the war approaches to the tents. The alarm grows hotter and the noise augments. The driving dust proclaims the danger near, and first their friends and then their foes appear. Their friends retreat, their foes pursue the rear. The camp is filled with terror and affright. The hissing shafts within the trench alight. An undistinguished noise ascends the sky, the shouts those who kill, and groans of those who die. But now the goddess mother, moved with grief, and pierced with pity, hastens her relief. A branch of healing dittany she brought, which in the Cretan fields with care she sought. Rough is the stern which woolly leaves surround, the leaves with flowers, the flowers with purple crowned. Well known to wounded goats, a sure relief to draw the pointed steel and ease the grief. This Venus brings, in clouds involved, and brews the extracted liquor with ambrosian dews, and odorous panacea. Unseen she stands, tempering the mixture with her heavenly hands, and pours it in a bowl, already crowned with juice of medicinal herbs, prepared to bathe the wound. The leech, unknowing of superior art which aids the cure, with this foments the part, and in a moment cease the raging smart. Stanched is the blood, and in the bottom stands the steel, but scarcely touched with tender hands. Moves up and follows of its own accord, and health and vigor are at once restored. Iapis first perceived the closing wound, and first the footsteps of a god he found. Arms, arms, he cries, the sword and shield prepare, and send the willing chief renewed to war. This is no mortal work, no cure of mine, nor art's effect, but done by hands divine. Some god our general to the battle sends, some god preserves his life for greater ends. The hero arms in haste, his hands enfold his thighs with cuisses of refulgent gold. Inflamed to fight, and rushing to the field, that hand sustaining the celestial shield, this grips the lance and with such vigor shakes, that to the rest the beamy weapon quakes. Then with a close embrace he strained his son, and kissing through his helmet thus begun. My son, from my example learn the war, in camps to suffer and in fields to dare. But happier chance than mine attend thy care. This day my hand thy tender age shall shield, and crown with honors of the conquered fields. Thou, when thy riper years shall send thee forth to toils of war, be mindful of my worth. Assert thy birthright, and in arms be known for Hector's nephew and Aeneas' son, he said, and striding issued on the plain. Antaeus and Menesthius and a numerous train attend his steps, the rest their weapons take, and crowding to the field, the camp forsake. So Menesthius and Achates and Ascanius are all helping Aeneas into a tent so that he can be treated. Aeneas has to be supported by his spear. He's so weak. He tugs at the arrow with both hands, pulling the wood out and leaving the metal in. Aeneas figures there's no way to get this thing out besides making the wound a little bigger so that he can get back to the fight. His friends are not excited about this, but they obey him. Iapis is the medic that is treating him, and he will use all these herbs to help Aeneas. He does his best to get the arrowhead out, and he's using all of his heavenly art, 591. He uses these softening simples or medicinal plants to lenify or alleviate the pain, and then he gets out these pincers to try to get the arrowhead out. And he's trying and trying, but it won't come, and he prays to the patron of his art, Apollo, but Apollo refuses to help. The arrowhead is still stuck. They can hear the war getting closer, that the Latins are approaching. They see the Trojans first and then the Latins shortly behind them. And the goddess mother is the one who finally has to help. Venus comes to hasten the relief of her son. She brings dittany from Crete, and this mixed with some ambrosia will become the panacea, the cure-all for his wounds. So she stands unseen and pours it into the bowl that Iapis is using. And so Iapis continues to use this on Aeneas, unaware that it's been changed. And suddenly, the pain is gone. And the arrowhead, which was lodged in there without even being touched by human hands or tools, seems to come out of its own accord. And Iapis cries out, "Get this man his weapons and his armor. This is not me doing this. Clearly, it is a god. A god has helped him because he is to fight and win." And so Aeneas arms in haste. He gets his cuisses, his thigh armor on, and he is inflamed to fight. He goes, embraces, strains his son, and kisses him through his helmet. And he says, "Learn from my example how to suffer, how to be daring, and how to conquer. And when you are older, you remember me and fight like I fight, as a nephew of Hector and a son of Aeneas." He says this, gets Antaeus and Menestheus, and leaves the camp to attack the Latins and Turnus.